The Lions made it 3 wins from 3 on Australian soil after Andy Farrell's men recorded a 21-point to 10 victory over the New South Wales Waratahs in Sydney. However, it was far from a perfect night, and Andy Farrell will have plenty to chew on. For a man who likes to describe performances as clunky, it'll be interesting to see what adjective he reaches for after that display. I'm Will Slattery. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ruaidhri O'Connor. And a reminder that our rugby coverage on the podcast is brought to you in association with Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as an official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, and the Irish men's and women's teams. The Energia Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Rud, I mentioned there, after the first game against Argentina, Andy Farrell came into the press room, didn't leave the stadium, and described the performance as clunky. We're now 4 games in, and we're seeing a kind of familiar pattern. There's a kind of a sloppiness with the ball in hand, a bit of sloppiness in execution. There was moments tonight where they put some good passages of play together. In particular, the Ellis Gaines try that was ruled out for a knock-on. Surprise, surprise. What do you make of that kind of general pattern that has emerged? No matter who's played, really, that kind of has crept into every performance.
Yeah, it's a good point, Will. I mean, I think it was the best game of the tour so far in terms of it being a proper contest. And I think we should start by paying tribute to those Waratahs team who didn't have a great Super Rugby season and were being written off by everyone here going into the game. Like, the bookies gave them absolutely no chance. And they were really good. Like, they made life really difficult for the Lions. And I think it was probably the most valuable exercise for Andy Farrell in terms of actually understanding the squad, where the limitations are and where they're at. It was a bit of a sense check for them, but it exposed a lot. And, I think a lot of players will go away from this having damaged their test chances. I think the team that, again, a bit like that Argentina game, the team that's in the stand or the players that weren't there from the start are the ones who will benefit the most from it. Will get a chance on Wednesday, which we're expecting to see close to what we, probably the test side against the Brumbies. But it hasn't really mattered. Like, the trends are there from all the games. The slow starts, they get desperate. That's what the other phrase Andy Farrell uses the whole time is desperation. We were a bit desperate, and I expect that to come up today. Like, they got turned over 20 times tonight, and yes, Charlie Gamble was brilliant. The open side, he almost reminded me of like Heinrich Brousseau in the 09 tour. And I wonder, will Joe Schmidt, I know he's a Kiwi, but he's been living in Australia a long time. I wonder, will Joe Schmidt draft him in because of the damage he did? I guess he has Fraser McWright to do that. A player who did unbelievable damage against Ireland back in November. But I guess the scrum went well, which hasn't been a pattern, so that's a positive. But there's not that many other positives. Their error count was really high. They were chasing it. And, they didn't adapt to the game. So their wide patterns weren't working. So if they were being smart, they would have gone through the Waratahs, because they're bigger and better players than these Waratahs players. So there's nothing wrong with sometimes adapting and just going direct. It's a frustration I have with Ireland sometimes, that they have a superiority in that area and they don't use it. So I'd say they'll be really frustrated with their game management, their error counts. They got over the line 4 times and didn't score with all 4 of them. The knock-ons over the line. Obviously, one was a double banking penalty from a maul, and they got turned over repeatedly as well. So there's so much for them to work on, and they're not training really over here. Like, they're going from match to match, and they're kind of. I thought there was a little bit of fatigue from all the travel and stuff as well involved in it as well. But that's the difficulty of Lions and difficulty of touring. So it's all explainable to some degree. But we're 2 weeks out from the first test now, and we're not really seeing them getting that much better.
The point you make about the training is an interesting one, because for me, isn't that where that kind of handling, that sharpness, that comes from that? Because, it actually reminds me of Andy Farrell's last international window back in November. Like, Ireland had a really poor, 4-match series with handling and their sloppiness with their passing not being as crisp as usual. So it's just funny that it's going to rear its head again when he's come back into a window. But that training point is an interesting one you make there, because like Raj on the TV, and he's been brilliant on the co-coms. You probably obviously haven't heard him over there, but he's been brilliant with Dan Biggar and Sam Moore, but was making a point about cohesion. But cohesion shouldn't really matter in terms of the handling, should it? Like, as in, I know these guys don't play together that often, but there's a bit of a basic sloppiness that's there, and maybe it's that training element that you mentioned.
Well, training builds cohesion. I think they're almost the same thing. I know what you mean. I think when Ireland were bedding in the Andy Farrell system, they were often guilty of kind of, trying to they're thinking about it too much. Like, you're thinking about where you should be standing. You're not necessarily in flow, and there's a bit of that going on. But at the same time, these are very good players, and there's passes going to deck that shouldn't be going to deck. There's players getting isolated that shouldn't get isolated. The high ball work was poor. Like, that's not a cohesion thing. And some of those were simple 50-50s. Hugo Keenan had a poor night, I think, and that was that probably sometimes it becomes a confidence thing that once a player that's usually so secure starts making efforts, that bleeds into the team, and you could see the belief leave them as the Waratahs started to kind of gain confidence, gain belief, and play their way into the game. So there was a lot going on. It was there's probably a lack of clarity because of that lack of training time. I thought it was much better and much more fluid when it was Gibson Park and Finn Russell last Wednesday. We know from Ireland that often when it's these performances, they blame the 10, and I don't think they're going to be that happy with how Finn Smith played, even though he didn't make any major errors or anything like that. But in terms of kind of running the team and making the right decisions, I think often it's the 10 who pays the price. And I think maybe it was a pretty good night for Owen Farrell sitting up in the stand, because maybe it needed that voice, that bit of tactical kind of awareness in game to change the point of attack, to change the plan, because the plan wasn't working. So there's a lot going on, but like they're also, I don't know how much we learned in that Reds and that Force game, but we learned a lot tonight. So there's value in it as well. And those players are a lot more battle hardened after that 8 minutes than the players were after those other two games.
Yeah, it's funny, like you mentioned, like a few Ireland comparisons, Waring, etc., coming to my mind. Like this performance really smacked of like that Fiji game a couple of years ago in November, when it was not quite the frontline team. There was a smattering of guys playing alongside some less experienced players who didn't play well. And a lot of those guys never really got another chance, or some of them never got a look or haven't in the subsequent years. And I could see Andy Farrell being fairly ruthless about that, because we know that the Brumbies team selection, which will be Monday morning at some stage announced, maybe overnight even, when we wake up, we'll have seen it. That I'm expecting that to be a much different team to what played today. So as much as today's performance, it's easy maybe to draw conclusions about how the team is going generally. Like the guys who play on Wednesday, it'll be significantly changed. And as you said, there's some guys who have been playing well, who are in good form, who didn't play today, that will make a big impact potentially on Wednesday. There's a couple of things I just want to speed through with you, because I know you have to go in a while, and there's a couple of things I want to get to. So we might kind of do a bit of a speed round on a couple of players and get your thoughts on how they went. Hugo Keenan, you mentioned him there. It was a big night for him. He missed the last game with a stomach bug. Full back is in a bit of flux. He got the nod with Blair Kinghorn on the wing. As you said, like kind of a drop ball early on, a poor missed tackle for the Waratahs try before half time. He can't be feeling great about his opening debut as a Lion.
No, like he hasn't played for more than a month. That he did have an illness last week, so there is some mitigation there, but it really didn't look like Hugo Keenan. He's usually so secure under that high ball, and I'd say, I felt bad for him because it was his Lions debut and he would have been looking forward to it, and this is a moment that all these players dream about, and it just didn't go his way at all. His first touch was a knock on. His high ball work wasn't as good as it should have been. When he ran the ball back, he didn't really get anywhere, and he got run over for the try as well. Now, he might argue that he got him to ground and the player got back up again, but you kind of need to stick that tackle and cling on. And yeah, it was a really tough night for him. And the problem he has is a bit like Rob Kearney in 2013. He's come on the tour injured and he's playing catch up because there's only two more games before the first test is picked. The team is picked. And while Kinghorn didn't tear up any trees tonight, I thought he looked quite sharp. And I actually expected them to take Kinghorn off for the last half an hour and then roll him back into the starting team on Wednesday, but they took Keenan off after 51 minutes, which maybe is a reflection of where he's at physically, and they gave Kinghorn the 80 minutes, a half an hour full back at the end. So I don't think it was Kinghorn didn't exactly like nail the jersey either, but like it's almost like he's going to get there by default, because unless Keenan tears up trees, like there is, at least even if you don't play on Wednesday, there's another game and a week between the Wednesday game and the first test. So there is going to be another opportunity for these players next Saturday, but this was a big chance, and really that team performance will damage a lot of individuals, and Keenan is definitely one of them who lost ground tonight.
Yeah, it's a good point you make on that last chance saloon next Saturday against the New Zealand-Australia selection, because there's some quality players in that team. So even if you don't get picked this Wednesday, there is still a good shop window to force your way in. Like in 2017, the last Wednesday game, I think Elliot Daly and Liam Williams both started and weren't maybe potentially mapped to start the first test until that game. So there's still a little bit of moving and shaking, even if they don't start on Wednesday, I think. Tadhg Beirne, before kickoff, was moved from second row to number 6 because Henry Pollock had a tight calf. And from when that happened, the mood music, I was like, oh, he probably would have loved another crack in his preferred position. And again, it was a sticky night for him again. Like, it's not the Tadhg Beirne we know we usually see. And even at the end, he had a knock on towards the end. He slammed his fist in the ground in frustration. It kind of summed up his night. Just doesn't seem to be happening for him on this tour.
No, he looks leggy. I mean, he plays an awful lot of minutes for Munster. He's a really important player for Ireland, and we were just talking about it here. Like, he looks more like a second row than a 6 at this stage of his career, and he's getting caught between two stools because, like, McCarthy has and Itoje are looking so energetic, and Chesham as well. They're all bouncing into games, and he's losing ground on all three of them. I don't think he was bad tonight. Like, he did some really good stuff. He held up Taniela Tupou over the line. He carried hard in kind of tight spaces. I don't think he likes playing 6 as much as he likes playing second row. He's said that before, but it's not an excuse. He's got to get on with it. And, like, you know, Farrell is a no excuses coach, so he's not going to buy any of that. He's going to have to judge them kind of on what they're putting out there. I know he's picked Owen Farrell based on his career achievements, but, like, when it comes down to, say, a Tadhg Beirne, yes, he's a lot of credit in the bank with his coaching ticket, but his form isn't brilliant, and he's not alone. Like, it's hard singling out players in our life tonight because not many players did play well, but he's a fella who you would have come over here thinking he's going to be right and firmly in the test match contention. And I think he'll be in the 23, but I don't think he starts based on what we've seen so far. And even the fact he played this game has probably put him out of sync with the kind of what we expect to be the test team on Wednesday. So, yeah, I think it was a big night for him to advance his cause, and I don't think he did enough to do that. And I don't think James Ryan did either, playing alongside him. I thought he was anonymous is probably a little bit harsh, but he again struggled to get to grips with the game. I'm sure, you know, a second watch off and James Ryan shows up much better with because his work rate stuff around the pitch. But again, he came off after 51 minutes, just back from injury. He did play in midweek off the bench, but I don't think he would have felt like he made his mark. And himself and Scott Cummings are looking like that midweek partnership for the kind of, well, you know, the traditional midweek dirt tracker partnership. Like, Van der Fleer wasn't brilliant either. He was okay, but he was outplayed by Charlie Gamble. Did some really good stuff. Was a bit loose in possession. Again, like, we expect a lot more from Josh Van der Fleer because we know what he's capable of. But he did a lot of things right. I don't think he was as, maybe, you know, didn't have as bad a night as, say, Hugo Keenan, but he's in a real tough battle with Jack Morgan. You know, Tom Curry hasn't played well in this tour, but he's a test lion, and if he has a big game on Wednesday, Pollock is in the mix. I don't think he'll start, but he's in the mix for the 23. I think the fact that Pollock was picked up at 6 suggested to me that they were trying to get him experience in all 3 back row positions so that he could cover all 3 in the test series. So, yeah, I think Finlay Bealham was probably the Irish player who came out of it with the most credit. I thought he played really well.
Yeah, but interesting. Just on Bealham, Bealham, like Sam Warburton was really bigging him up on the television, thinking it's funny though. Like, Bealham, part of another solid scrum that won a few penalties. But, like, if him and Furlong are both fit, Rod, like, I do struggle to see a world where the Ireland head coach starts Bealham, like, over Furlong if they're both fit.
And I thought Furlong was pretty good off the bench as well.
He was good.
Like, he made an impact. He's carrying out, and he's, if you know, from what we've seen behind the scenes, he's a really big leader in this group. Yeah. And Beirne is as well. Like, Beirne is named captain tonight. That's an indication of where Andy Farrell views him. But someone like Bealham, and he's a classic example of a fellow who comes on a Lions tour and wasn't even supposed to come in the first place, and he arrives with a bit of freshness because Connacht's season finished early, and real lust for it. Like, he's just really embraced it and dug in, and he's kind of he looks top of the ground, he looks fast. His family he's just left the pitch, but he's down there with his kid. He looks like he's really loving it. Like, even behind the scenes stuff, he's kind of become very popular within the squad as well. And yeah, it's like one of those classic unlikely Lions stories that, as it stands, I think he's playing better than Will Stewart, who's, like, you know, won a premiership 3 weeks ago and is England's starting tight head. But it's a lovely story, really, because given, you know, Bealham was initially from Canberra and all of that we, you know, Keane Tracy covered really well in the Once a Woman a couple of weeks ago. So he is one who definitely did himself no harm. And I think that if they didn't get it, I think initially when he threw on that bench with McCarthy, the full front row, and Duhan van der Merwe, it looked like they were going to up the tempo, but really they got kind of sucked into the malaise as well. They did some good stuff, but it wasn't all singing, all dancing. They didn't come on and break the Waratahs.
The Genge knock on seemed to like they arrived with a lot of explosivity, and they like that try. It was like changing point of attack. All the subs were basically involved in this great, powerful power pack move, and then the Genge knock on kind of knocked the momentum out of the change. It looked like,
yeah, and it was kind of just summed up the night, didn't it? Like because they do something right, and then they just lose momentum and lose impetus because of mistakes, and it was just that error count. It was, I'd say Andy Farrell must be furious up in that coach's box because he demands better from these players. He's like he's made it clear. Like I expect him to be like the Argentina game down in the press conference now because he expects a lot more from these players. He tells them you're the best of the best, and then they go out and play like that against a middling Super Rugby team who played really well on the night.
And the Argentina game, it was their first match. Like, it was kind of a more of a scratch team because there was a lot of guys who were unavailable. Argentina are an international outfit and brought a really unbelievable performance, I thought, that night. This is 4 weeks of training in, 5 weeks of training in, and their fourth match. There really is no excuses for how poor the team played with the ball, with that sloppiness I referred to earlier. And it really said it all. It's funny, there was a great bit of camera work. Cut to the coach's box as a graphic came up that said lines error count 14 as they knocked it on again, and Farrell was just shaking his head. Like, there's not, you could just tell he was absolutely fuming. So I'll be fascinated to hear what he says to you when you go down in a few minutes. One thing I wanted to get your opinion on, one positive I thought, actually, I thought the centers looked, it was the first time I thought both centers kind of played in unison, kind of both playing well at the same time. Maybe no kind of, they're both play with each other at international level. I'm wondering now, do you think is that the tack he goes down? I'm expecting it to be Bundy and Ringrose for the Brumbies game. For me, it probably makes sense to go either or now because the guys have such kind of inbuilt chemistry from their international career and obviously a club level for the two guys from Scotland as well, that it makes sense to lean into that, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, well, he's given them each, they've kind of all played with each other at this stage. He's gone to, two different combinations, and now they're going to play with their international colleagues, the two players that tonight. I thought they were good in terms of certainly that try where, Tuipulotu, lovely front door pass to Hugh Jones, who went over, and obviously Jones got a second try later on. Like, I don't think Tuipulotu was direct enough at times, and I don't know if he gave him that focal point. So yeah, I thought they were decent, but again, it was in a team that wasn't outstanding. They were probably two of the better players, but it still wasn't outstanding stuff. And I don't think they did enough certainly to make give Bundy Aki and Gary Ringrose any sleepless nights tonight, because I think they'll back themselves to come out on Wednesday, possibly behind a more dominant pack and outside Jamison Gibson Park and Finn Russell, and really shine because they know each other so well as well. So, I thought they were fine. They were good without being, super impressive. I thought Ben Earl, Alex Mitchell were the kind of players who stood out to me. I know Earl gave away a few penalties, but he looked really, again, fast, top of the ground, making yards, showing up. They found them very well. But and I thought Mitchell, was really good in that second half. Some really good decisions. He's clearly the second choice 9, and he'll be an important player in the tests.
His kicking game isn't great. He's such a good sniper. Like he had the Waratahs absolutely in ribbons with his sniping.
Yeah, and the 50-22 was pretty good. But I know what you mean. Like the boxes weren't brilliant, but I thought he had some good moments. But there wasn't many lines who really just nailed it. And I think the centers were decent, and I don't think. I think you could play them both in the test, and they go well. Like they played well against Australia before, but I certainly think I wouldn't go writing Bundy Aki and Gary Ringrose off just yet.
No, I meant more that I just think it's better to maybe
the combination.
Yeah, the combination.
Yeah.
I think maybe mixing and matching them hasn't gone. I don't think we've had a game up to now where both centers kind of played 7 out of 10 plus at the same time. Maybe, but to be right, your point, you obviously have a different viewpoint, which obviously is interesting. We're watching the same.
No,
game.
I don't. I think I just think the combination is probably going to be the Irish one, or there is a certain new player who's arrived in the last couple of days who could come into that mix because they may feel like they need that voice, that leadership, that commanding figure that Owen Farrell is, and I think. I think the way Andy Farrell views this game will be a lot around decision making and leadership and control, and I think that is an issue in this squad. I think it's a quiet squad, and I think that's this almost paves the way for Owen Farrell to ride to the rescue, which I know you'd love.
You're definitely right, Rod. This is the performance, exactly like the kind of cover performance Andy Farrell has now to use Owen Farrell in whatever way he sees fit, and you can point to this performance exactly for what you're describing. Because, like, when we chatted about this 2 or 3 days ago, I don't deny that his leadership would be valuable on this tour. Like, as we've seen that is maybe an area where they don't have that, those kind of I suppose inspirational figures, kind of those test match animals, as Ian McGeechan might call them. So I'm fascinated. So before I let you go, do you expect him to be on the bench for Brumbies? Do you expect him? What are you thinking?
I certainly think he'll be involved. I mean, he didn't like he wasn't on the pitch during the warm up here, so he was in the stands. He got kind of mildly booed. It was quite funny with Will Stewart kind of joining in and Farrell kind of enjoying that moment, but it was kind of half boos, half cheers. It wasn't very vicious. I think he has to be involved. Like, you kind of have to get these players. Like, Ben White got to go tonight off the bench. Kinghorn's involved now. You kind of, if you're bringing him out, you got to play him. Like, there's no point in having him. And he put him in that number 22 jersey. Like, Marcus Smith did some lovely stuff tonight, but he also did some poor stuff. He's not really in contention. And I get the sense that they're not convinced by Finn Smith yet. I think they see him as kind of, I think I said this the other day, they see him as like Marcus Smith in that first tour. Sorry, as Owen Farrell in 2013 when he was a young up-and-comer who got great experience out of it. But I'm not sure they see him as a guy who's going to win a test series for them in Australia. And that's why Owen Farrell probably is headed for that number 22 shirt in the tests. But he has to play. He hasn't played for a long time. But I think they're going to go Gibson Park and Russell behind the kind of what's looking like the first choice pack with the bench front row that came on tonight. Itoje, McCarthy, probably Chesham,
Morgan and Conan.
Curry and Conan.
Curry shouldn't be there. Curry's at a port.
Curry's one of those players I think they'll try and play into form. And Morgan's just played started the game on Wednesday, came off the bench tonight, so I can't see him going three in a row. Pollock could play. He likes Pollock. I'd be surprised, but he's in the mix. And then, I kind of expect Kinghorn to back up at 15, but Keenan come off at 51. Maybe they'll give him another goal, but that 15, that's a bit of it. Like, we've talked about six being a bit of a problem. I mean, I'd be tempted to call it Ryan Baird personally, but maybe that's just my Ryan Baird fan club stuff. But they're really missing a Chesham can do it, but I think even if they get Courtney Laws over for a few weeks, that profile, I just don't think they have it.
I think we're one good Chesham performance away from him starting. I think if he plays well, if he's picked on Wednesday and plays well, I think he's nailed on to start. Just because the back row balance still seems to be off every game I watch, and it's so funny because Andy Farrell picks his back rows with Ireland so differently. He picks a fairly archetypal back row with Ireland, like a 6 is a 6, a 7 is a 7, and 8 is an 8. And then for this squad selection, he just didn't do that. He kind of just left out one complete player profile almost, and now
he did. I asked him about it on Thursday, and he obviously Pollock had been picked, and he said, "Look, Henry's a brilliant line out forward as well." So maybe we're sleeping on Henry Pollock as a 6. I'd be surprised, but it's like they clearly rate him, and maybe he's a kind of I try not to use the phrase bolter, but I almost did there. So maybe that will be the kind of surprise selection in the 6 jersey. Because as I said, I don't see Byrne there anymore. I think he's had to put on size to play second row at the level that he does, and I think it looks like it's slowed him down for that 6 role. And he's still a very good second row, but I'm just not sure if he's a 6 at this stage of his career.
Yeah, well, it's certainly one of the big talking points still. And the tour keeps moving at pace. You're going to talk to Andy Farrell now in a minute. We'll have another team announcement on Monday, and things move on already. You don't really have that much time to dwell on things. Rod, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you later.
Cheers, Will.